makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part.
Okay, people, are you ready for the best explanation of the Russia-Ukraine conflict? The best, bar none. It's not going to come from me because why would I give my opinion on this if already we have the best explanation somewhere else? So let's watch. This is from I Am PoliticsGirl, who is, I guess, a podcaster. I'd never heard of her before, but this is the best explanation, so I will have to trust her. Let's watch.
Okay, so I'm not an international expert, and I don't pretend to be.
First red flag. I am not an international expert, and I don't pretend to be. So why would I want the opinions on a very, very complex conflict? This is not as black and white as it seems, as most foreign conflicts are these days. We are long past the age of the good and the bad guys in any of these crises. So why would I not want to listen to an expert? Why would I not want to do a bit of research on sort of the origins of this conflict? Why Russia is seeking to intervene in Ukraine? What is going on with the Ukrainian government? Why is it seeking NATO membership? I mean, these are difficult things. I mean, I know people who do PhDs on these things, so it's not easy. Um, but apparently, someone who with zero international affairs experience is going to give us a 2-minute summary. That's the best explanation you'll ever going to hear. And the problem with this is we live in an era where there is so much distrust of experts because let's be honest, a lot of just because you're an expert doesn't mean your opinion is a good one. There's plenty of experts with really, really bad takes. But this also doesn't mean that any non-expert can just fill that void and give their own idiotic opinions on complex subject matters. My main criticism, what I fear is we're creating a world in which we have all these experts that are very kind of siloed into specific niche topics. But then the media picks the ones that they want, they give bad takes, etc. And then we're moving on into a type of intellectual environment, which I see a lot in my own country, in Mexico, which has like a small number of very well-known figures who give an opinion about absolutely everything. And to be honest, no one can be a massive expert on all these subjects at the same time. Um, the reason that I give opinion on economics and politics, because those are the two subject matters that I am most familiar with, that I have professional experience in, that I have a degree on. So beyond this, like you don't see me talk about black holes or evolution or all these other very interesting things that I would love to talk about. But come on, why would you listen to me? It's pointless. Uh, and this is the same case here. And I have a lot of issues with this streak of anti-intellectualism and anti-expertise, because just because experts are frequently wrong about a lot of things does not mean that any other dipshit can fill that void and suddenly be more knowledgeable about these issues. I mean, the sad thing about this is that you have to, I hate using this phrase because the anti-vaxxers have kind of corrupted it, but you have to do your own research. You really want to have an opinion on the Russia-Ukraine conflict? Spend a day reading a bit about recent history between these two countries and form your own opinion. And when you listen to experts, don't just listen to, the guy that CNN will put or the guy that Fox News is going to put. Look for academics, look for, local voices as well. Don't go to the gray zone either. But yeah. Anyway, let's keep watching.
But I'm going to try in broad strokes what's going on right now with the Ukraine, Russia, and America. Backstory. Putin was enraged when anti-corruption, pro-democracy demonstrations led to the overthrow of the Ukrainian government in 2014. Like I explained in far more detail on the PoliticsGirl podcast, Rise of Autocracy, if you want to check it out, democracy is contagious.
She's basically like a mouthpiece of basically every New York Times op-ed. That's kind of what she is. And I looked at her. I looked at her profile, and it just is. This is like liberal centrist propaganda. Yeah, I don't have much respect for these people, but let's keep watching.
And if Ukrainians could get rid of their corrupt dictator, what would stop the Russian people from doing the same?
Okay, this is just so idiotic. Just so idiotic. Trust me, the reason that Putin started to bully Ukraine or was alarmed by the overthrow of the Ukrainian government was not because he thought that he could be overthrown. Russia is a pretty well established authoritarian regime. There is very little, near zero chance that Putin could get toppled anytime soon. This is, an authoritarian state with a crony capitalist oligarchy that is almost behind, fully behind Putin insofar as they can continue enriching themselves. So any chance that Russia is going to be overthrown, this is comparing an established authoritarian regime with the very weak government that Ukraine had before 2000. To this day, it's a very weak government. So just absolutely idiotic that you're making an analogy between the two countries. And also this idea that democracy is contagious. Has she not gotten the memo that like democracy has been in retreat in pretty much the entire world over the past decade? I mean, you can easily argue authoritarianism is contagious too. So, the rise of the far right, that seems to have been far more contagious over the past 5 to 10 years than democracy. So again, this is just rehashing the sort of platitudes that liberal centrists love to hear.
It's one of the reasons Putin is so hell-bent on putting the Ukraine back in its place. Not only will it dissuade other countries around him from getting pro-democracy ideas, but if he does it, and America, NATO, and the EU just let it happen, it'll prove on the world stage that these Western nations and democracy itself no longer wield the power they once did.
That has been pretty obvious to him for a long time. He literally took over the Crimea, despite the fact that Russia had signed a 1996 treaty guaranteeing Ukrainian, respecting Ukraine's sovereignty and borders in exchange for its nuclear weapons. So Russia has not given a damn about this at all. They have seen how weak the West has been in terms of its response to their invasion of Georgia, their invasion of Crimea, their support of separatists in eastern Ukraine, in the Donbass, their involvement in Syria. What has the West done against this? Pretty much nothing. This is just, his latest attempt at continuing to bully a country and see what he can get out of it. Again, hope. I mean, it is not incorrect to say that he is testing the limits of Western response. But to say that like this hasn't happened before, to imply that this hasn't happened before, or that it would automatically lead to like China invading Taiwan, again, completely different geostrategic interest between the two countries. Frankly, Ukraine is way less important for US and Western strategic interest than Taiwan is. Way less. And it's conceivable to imagine that the US would intervene in a war, in a Chinese invasion of Taiwan, while the US would not intervene in a Russian invasion of Ukraine. So again, this I genuinely wonder like how brain dead her audience is, that they just and actually this is just like a trick that the entire kind of foreign policy punditry community always does. It's the equivalent of clickbait. Um, you see it from like the Fareed Zakaria's, uh, etc. It's like, well, if something happens here, then how is this going to lead to it happening here, 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 and there? And then you just bring up this opens the door to more idiotic analysis in all these other things. So making all these false analogies, again, is very reductive because no, the situation between China and Taiwan is completely different to the situation between Russia and Ukraine.
That in this new century, no one can really stop him and his allies from taking and doing what they want. And believe me, other nations will be watching. Nations like China who would be very happy to do the same with Taiwan. If Russia can just take over a country and install a pro-Russian leader in the Ukraine, that's kind of a go-ahead for other nations' ambitions. So the US is in a precarious position. We can't instigate a war with Russia. There's no appetite in this country for war. We are all...
There's also no appetite for war in Russia. Russians really aren't exactly thrilled about the idea of going to war in the Ukraine. And the issue of, there's kind of two sides to this. On one hand, you sort of see the alarmist press of like Russia, doing a lightning war and crushing Ukraine. I mean, there's no doubt that Russia has much better trained armed forces, much better equipped. On paper, they should win. But then in practice, the extent of Russian capabilities is still kind of an unknown. And remember, they lost that war in Chechnya, in a situation in which they were way more powerful than they are now. So I don't know. I wouldn't want to make a guess I would probably bet on Russia winning. But whether this would be a resounding, amazing lightning victory, I don't know. Whether they would get bogged down, maybe they would happen a bit kind of like Iraq, a shock and awe start to a war that ends up getting bogged down. Ukraine is a big country, and it's also a highly populated country as well. So I don't know.
Already a divided nation. And with Republicans behaving the way they are, with Trump and people like Tucker Carlson and Madison Cawthorn...
Of course, like any liberal, it's the Republicans who are beating the war drum. It's never Democrats, despite the fact that Democrats have started as many wars as Republicans in recent memory and have, in terms of interventionism, are just as bad. In fact, the one positive thing I will ever say about Trump is that he didn't start a war, unlike his predecessors.
And the Republican senators who spent July 4th in Moscow being so overtly pro-Russia, we can't unite the country against a common enemy if half of the country is rooting for the enemy.
Oh, Russiagate. This is, oh my God. I hate to use this word because like every single stupid Jimmy Dore fan uses it against the people who they don't like, but this is like proper shitlib commentary. This is shitlib commentary. My God.
So our Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, is trying to use diplomacy.
The adults are in the room.
And give Putin an out, to encourage him to hold off invading the Ukraine. The West has threatened sanctions with profound economic effects if Russia does invade. It has armed the Ukraine with weapons and helicopters to defend themselves, and...
Helicopters? Have they given Ukraine helicopters? I know they've given them anti-tank missiles, but yeah.
America is in discussions with a number of countries about stepping up production of gas to our European allies, who are deeply worried that if Russia invades, there's going to be a massive gas shortage because Russia provides Europe with 40% of its gas supply.
Now that is a very, very reasonable suspicion to make. That you can't really promote, the war hawks have to be a bit dovish when you consider the fact that whether it's war, which I obviously hope that it doesn't happen, but if there are sanctions, any retaliation from Russia would leave Europe in a very, very difficult situation. And She seems to suggest that like 40% of your gas supply can just be replaced in a matter of days. I'm not quite sure this is it's that easy. The fact of the matter is, Europe has gotten incredibly dependent on Russian gas, and they should have seen this coming.
There are people in America, namely Republicans, calling for us to implement the sanctions now, to take the first shot, thinking that it will show strength. But as Blinken said, sanctions are to deter Russian aggression. If you trigger them before they are aggressive, you lose the deterrent effect. It's like grounding your kid before he has the party. You have to threaten the grounding and hope he doesn't have the party.
This is basically like suburban shitlib commentary. Again, I hate using that term just because it's been misused so much by the dumb left, but it's so appropriate here. This is so appropriate here.
Also, this idea that the party who is so pro-Russia is telling us to be the aggressors begs the question of whose side they're on. If we do something before they do something, then we're the bad guys. What we're doing now is hoping for the best but preparing for the worst, expecting Russia to be aggressive without starting the conflict ourselves, which I believe is the most prudent step at this time. Does that make sense?
No, it doesn't, because you're basically just rehashing, the Democratic Party line. That's what you're doing. You're not offering really any added value to this discussion. You're not offering any like scenarios of what like, I really want to know, like what would happen. I truly hope that there isn't a war. But if there is a war, what's the US going to do? What has it made clear? How far is it willing to go? And I'm not sure many Western countries really are I mean, especially the Europeans, because the Europeans really have like zero stomach for any kind of military conflict these days, unless it's helping the U.S. invade a Middle Eastern country. But a land war or something much more intense in Eurasia, I don't think they're up for it. But yeah, that was the best commentary you will get about this issue. Can you believe it? Anyway, I don't know what to say. If you want to know what my position on this conflict is, I support Ukraine. I'm sorry to all the tankies who get a hard-on imagining Russian tanks steamrolling any country that is allied to the West. But the fact of the matter is Ukraine is a sovereign country. As a sovereign country, it deserves to have its sovereignty respected. Part of that sovereignty also means that it can choose who to ally with. If Ukraine wants to join NATO, then it is perfectly in its right to do so. This idea that just because NATO is expansion into Russia's border. Dude, NATO's already at Russia's borders. The Baltic states are part of NATO and they border Russia. So this is a meaningless distinction. If Russia doesn't want its neighboring countries to join NATO, maybe it shouldn't fucking take over part of their territories. Maybe it shouldn't be financing and intervening to support separatists who support Russia. And the tankies don't get this. They seriously don't get this. And I say this as someone from a country who in the past had been bullied and had territory taken over by its bigger, powerful neighbor. And when I see tankies complain about US and Western imperialism and then give a blank check for any other anti-US government to do the exact same thing, my stomach turns. Because this is the equivalent of the US threatening to invade Mexico, threatening to take over a piece of Mexico, already funding separatists in Mexico. And imagine and Mexico wanting to ally itself with China or Russia to avoid that. And then some dipshit in Russia or Ukraine or in China saying, no, that's bad. The US should defend its backyard. That's ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. So, yeah, I truly hope there isn't a war for the good of the Ukrainian people. Um, but rest assured that this kind of analysis is not helping. And like I said at the beginning, a, com- a conflict so complex as this deserves a bit more than someone on their kitchen table in their suburban home giving you basically a 2-minute summary of just any New York Times headline or op-ed on this issue. So I encourage people to, again, I hate using these phrases. This video has made me use phrases that like shitlib and do your own research that I don't want to, that have been corrupted by all these people that I hate. But I'll say it again. Do your research. Spend a day just investigating the backstory of the Ukraine-Russia relationship. Form your own opinions. Don't just believe shitlib mom, suburban mom, or don't believe, tanky sites like the Gray Zone, which have their own agenda. So on that note, if you like this video, please like, please share. Most importantly, please subscribe. I will see you next time.